of the quotes here, the one that I am most taken by and really want to have some focus on is the top left one, the Microsoft one. If you take two people, one of them is a learn-it-all and the other one is a know-it-all, the learn-it-all will trump the know-it-all in the long run. And I think essentially what that's saying is that if you reach a point where you feel that your knowledge is saturated, you know everything that you need to know, then actually you miss out on a huge amount. And as an organisation, particularly, I think when we're organisations that are full of experts, aren't we? And all sorts of, everyone on this call will be an expert in their field in one way or another. The know-it-all perspective is a real trap that we risk falling into. Let me just. I can move my slide deck on. Oh, there you go. There you go. So I think this diagram really beautifully explains this. I think, I'm, as I said at the beginning, I'm a consultant psychiatrist by background. I've done research in mental health. I've written a book about it. I'm an expert, but of course I'm only an expert in what I know and what I can see. So I might, from this diagram, be an absolute expert on that triangle. I might feel like I know that triangle inside out. But of course, I'm missing a huge amount in just taking that one perspective. I don't know, because I'm very fortunate to have never had the perspective of being someone who has had to use mental health services. I have cared for people with mental health problems in my family. But again, I've been in a privileged position of understanding how those mental health services work and being a doctor and then being able to have that kind of influence that others who are outside the system might not be able to have as a carer. I don't have the perspective of a GP or someone who's in our community who really could do with using our services but is terrified of them and doesn't know how to take the next step in. The only way that any of us can improve what we do is through looking through other people's lenses. So I think that know it all to learn it all is really crucial to the approach that we need to take. It needs to be really open and really curious about other people's perspectives. We have to learn so that we understand when things go wrong. We obviously have to learn in order to deliver high quality, evidence-based, up-to-date practice. And we have to be continuously curious. And, the opportunities that we have every day to ask questions are really critical. Now, those of us who are in mental health services tend to be pretty curious about people's lives. And that's, working in mental health gives you a great opportunity to explore the depths of your curiosity around others. But what we sometimes then fail to do is apply that curiosity to our leadership, our management, our improvement work and other aspects of what we do. We need to be curious, asking questions, interested in what's going on. If we're going to be really effective in our improvement work, we need to have good mechanisms and systems for learning in our organisations. And really, QI is all about problem solving, and we will do that best if we take a learn it all approach. So what stops us from learning? And I think there are a number of barriers to learning that are absolutely, I've seen them through my career. I think some of them are quite embedded in some of the ways that the NHS and other organisations work, and that we really need to be cognizant of. Fear of failure is one of the really key things. And I think, people who work in NHS services are caring, compassionate people who come to work to do their absolute best. And sometimes that in itself can be a barrier to people taking the kind of risks that they sometimes need to take in order to be able to get the outcomes that we need. As an example of that, was involved in the care of an elderly gentleman when I was working recently on the Isle of Wight, who was living independently at home with support from family and some carer support, some external support coming in a couple of hours a few times a week. And he developed a urinary tract infection and ended up in hospital. Probably shouldn't have ended up in hospital, but did. And the first thing that the family were told when he went into the ward was that they couldn't leave his walker there, his Zimmer frame, on the wall, because they couldn't keep it there and it was too risky, and they would care for him in bed. And so the family took his Zimmer frame home. Now, it won't be a surprise to anybody that that's fairly disastrous to an elderly person who is becoming increasingly frail. He didn't walk independently again. He didn't return home. And the fear of falling, the fear of tripping over a Zimmer frame, outweighed the fear of the potentially positive outcome that would come from allowing him to take the risks around getting out of bed. And I think we get stuck in those kind of dilemmas all the time, and the fear can really stop us from taking a step back and looking again, as I say, through the eyes of the person that we're caring for, and thinking about what does failure look like for them, because it might look different to what failure looks like for us. Of course, leadership support is really important. If the leadership of an organisation don't prioritise learning, then the rest of the organisation won't. And one of the direct consequences is around this point of inadequate resources. We know we're all under financial pressure at the moment. There's all of this Aradazi stuff in the press today about the broken NHS, and the huge funding challenges that we've got, the massive issues that we've got around waiting times, all of those things that add pressure into our systems. And I've seen it time and again that one of the responses to that is, let's cut the study budget, let's reduce the amount of time that people spend on learning, because it feels like a low-hanging fruit. And actually it's hugely counterproductive to take away the opportunities that people have to learn and reflect, and to develop their thinking about how we could do this stuff better. We by staying on the hamster wheel actually often make it worse. Rigid hierarchies can be this is I guess a command and control idea, the sense that you will do as you're told rather than question and come to collective views about what the right thing is to do, an absolute know-it-all approach that is really counterproductive. Resistance to change is often said to be a barrier, and I've worked in mental health services for nearly 40 years now, and I can't quite grasp the scale of the change. The scale of the change is absolutely monumental. We've all, even those who are nowhere near as old as I am, will have experienced really significant change over the courses of our careers. The NHS is absolutely all about change. I think what's difficult when people talk about change fatigue, I think often it's about change that doesn't make sense to people, that they're not engaged in, that they don't feel they have any control over, where they can't see what the outcomes are that we're trying to achieve. I think there's a huge appetite for the right kind of change done in the right way. And so we need to be really mindful of the approach that we take to change, including all of our improvement work, and to, I think, probably reframe that resistance to we're probably not taking the right approach with people if what they're doing is digging their heels in, and it will require a bit more time and discussion to get that right. I think lack of recognition and rewards is an important thing too, and sometimes we've reward is really powerful, I think, in telling people what we want them to achieve, and pointing things in the right direction. And we too often fail to say thank you, to say well done, to really celebrate when people are doing the right thing. And of course, we talk a lot about blame culture. And so when we think about a blame culture, I guess we're thinking about the response to what happens when something goes wrong. So if the patient gets out of bed and falls over and fractures their neck or femur, from the example earlier, if the nurse who's caring for that patient receives any of these responses: "You are wrong, I'm furious, this is really inconvenient for me as the manager because I've got to go and fill a load of forms in, this must never happen again," then you, I think, can see what impact this has. And I'm just curious. You're very quiet at the moment, and so I just invite you to stick your hand up or in the chat and just to reflect on what you think the impact these kind of blaming statements might be having on people. Are they things that you've come across in your work? Stunned you all into silence. Anita?
Yeah, Lesley, this really resonates with me, and it's quite sad, really. But in a previous life, working clinically, I have heard some of these things being said either to myself or to colleagues. And yeah, you're right. People don't want to then stick their head above the parapet to say maybe we could change this. It's no, we can't do that. We'll just carry on and do what we usually do. So it does absolutely stifle that creativity in practice.
Yeah. You can see how a response like that might result in you saying, "Oh, I'm not, people are not going to bring their Zimmer frames in. I'm not going to be mobilising people," if that's the reaction that you get. Tracy?
I think the other thing is that people then stop reporting, so then we don't have the information to start improving on. So
Yeah.
we get to the point, staff struggle to find the time to put incidents on our instance systems anyway. So if they feel that they're going to get the blame, then it's just an excuse not to report it. So yeah, I think that can be a big impact of blame.
Thank
And,
you. Yeah,
and Lesley, we've
well,
had Susan in the chat, who agrees it stifles creativity, but it also stops you progressing and makes you question yourself and affects your confidence.
yeah. And Colin?
I was just going to say, if I'm blaming somebody else, then I'm not really learning either. I'm just passing the
It's a really good
responsibility
point.
for the issue over. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that hugely defensive response, isn't it? That again is a big barrier to us being able to learn together. Yeah. What I think we need to be able to do is to reframe these blame questions in a way that is much more constructive and enabling of learning. And again, back to the being curious: what happened and why, and how could you have done this differently, rather than you did that wrong. And I think we need to work hard on that kind of positive reframing in order to give people that sense of safety to be able um, to learn together. And exactly as Tracy says, to report, to let people know that things have gone wrong so that they have confidence that it will be reflected on in a positive way. So what are the things that we need to do to create a learning culture? I think that the idea of continuous learning alongside continuous improvement is really, really important. Many people within the NHS do that anyway, don't they? It's a kind of, I think there are many people who are learning throughout their careers, doing the book learning as well as the reflections and learning on what they do. But we need to have the systems and processes in place to absolutely enable and support that. And I think the leadership is so crucial in this context. We need to have leaders that are able to be supportive, to be open, transparent in what they do, and are supporting and modelling the behaviours that we want to see. And we want to really celebrate when things go well, and apply the new working. And you might be wondering why Colin the caterpillar is on that slide, and it links to the last point. So Anita and I started the day today. We had a lovely start to the day, didn't we? We went to Nicholstown GP surgery in Southampton, where we were handing out shout out awards certificates to 2 members of staff who have just done the most amazing quality improvement work. The specific thing that we were recognising them for was about work where they had managed to reach out to harder to reach parts of the community by taking the opportunities that vaccination clinics give and widening them so that people were able to access a whole range of other supports when they came in for the vaccination, including things like financial support and breastfeeding support, a whole range of other things, which has been incredibly well received and is starting to be extended beyond other organisations. And when we were talking to these 2 amazing women this morning who'd led this work, we were asking what's the key learning for everywhere else? And they said Colin meetings. And the Colin meetings are collaborative innovation networks. I think that's right. But it's also Colin the cake. So they what they suggested was that the thing that had worked really well for them is that every 2 weeks at lunchtime, with cake as an absolute core part of it, they would have conversations about innovations and ideas for improvement. And there's kind of no bad ideas in that. People come with all sorts of what they sometimes think are wild and wacky ideas that actually turn into amazing innovations. They take everything seriously. Some things they can discount in the meeting, and other things they absolutely work up into improvement projects. And the scope, the range of the work that they're doing through these Colin meetings was amazing. And that clearly is an approach that I think could apply in pretty much all of our services. So I think just as a good takeaway is the idea of a Colin meeting. I think the other thing to say is about psychological safety. And I think it's a thread that's run through everything that I've said so far, but just to say it really directly, people need to be safe, feel safe to be able to talk about failure. I think we all do. There's a real vulnerability in admitting mistakes, in saying, I really cocked that up. And in order to do that, you need to feel that that will land in the right way with the people that you're talking to, and that there'll be a mutually supportive way forward. And so developing psychological safety within teams is something that we need to really proactively work on. It won't just come accidentally. We need to create these environments in which people do feel safe. We need to feel that there are open conversations, that we're transparent, that we're respectful, supportive and engaging. All of those things are really critical. And I love the comment I've just seen there about failure is the pathway to success and celebrating failure more. I think that's absolutely right. I also think I couldn't totally agree with that, but in addition, we should also be finding more rigorous mechanisms for celebrating when things go right in our clinical practice. If something goes wrong, we have very rigorous mechanisms which may be more or less effective depending on the culture in which we work. But sometimes, and very often actually, things go really well. The experience is brilliant, the outcomes are brilliant, we get really good feedback, and we don't in those moments tend to take a step back and think, oh, so what contributed to that success? And what can we learn from making things right? And I think that the nature of NHS is such that we do tend to linger on the negative rather than the positive. And if there's an opportunity to turn that around, that would be great too. So, you know, we can identify key individuals who are doing the amazing things I described in the primary care world this morning, who absolutely deserve their certificates. But there are staff every day doing amazing things that actually we need to build that sense of recognition of and celebration of success into that as well, without turning it into a culture in which failure is not an option. So we need to get the balance right. I think this is my last slide, and then I'll open up for any questions or conversation about any of this. And this is absolutely key. It goes back to that slide at the beginning about the different perspectives. We can't improve if we don't understand the perspectives of the people who use our services, the partners that we're working with, our communities, whoever, without really understanding those perspectives. I love this diagram because it describes my new role. My new role is about quality improvement and co-production, and you can see it says where the magic happens is where the two intersect. So I'm looking forward to the magic happening in my role, because I think that's right. I think there's huge opportunity here for us to do things really differently, to shift our approach from one in which we do to people to one in which we do with. And the more I think about co-production, the more I would extend those views beyond just service users. So, you know, traditionally and often when we think about co-production, we're talking particularly about people who use services working with us. And of course, that's absolutely vital. An improvement that doesn't involve the service user is not going to work. But actually, we also need to co-produce with frontline staff, with our partners, with our communities, with a whole range of people. I'm really conscious of you know, you can have, in an inpatient environment for quite a few years, I was an acute mental health consultant in an inpatient service, and was really conscious that the healthcare support workers had an entirely different kind of relationship with the patients to the relationship I had with them. Again, different perspectives, and we had to work really hard to get their perspectives into the decision making in the ward. And I think there are still probably a lot of places where that just doesn't happen. And we lose value by not co-producing really widely with everybody. It's not just with the patient, it's with all of the different perspectives. But of course, it's absolutely with the patient. And so one of the things that we're doing in the development of the new organisation is making a commitment that the voice of people with lived experience will be central to decision making throughout the organisation. And by that we mean decision making in a clinical setting. We won't do a risk assessment or develop a care plan or decide what to do next from an individual perspective without that true co-production and collaboration. But I also mean clearly in improvement, in co-production, improvement, transformation, research, and so on. But we also mean from a strategic perspective as well. So when the trust is making decisions about how to spend its money, or how to prioritise in terms of clinical services, that we'll have a service user voice in those discussions and influencing what we're doing. And that's quite a big ask. And we're working through how we do that, how we go from actually having very, very little of that, and where it is quite patchy, to creating an infrastructure that enables us to do that in the new organisation. I think that's one of the most exciting opportunities that will be really, truly transformational and really enable us to shift from that know-it-all to learn-it-all approach that we want to take. So I'll stop there. I'll take down the slides, and really interested to hear your reflections or any questions. Does this, what I've been talking about, resonate with you? And is there anything you'd add that I haven't included in this? Susan.
Yeah, I really like what you were saying about the if you take learning away, it's a disadvantage. But I wonder about how we support those frontline staff who are in very pressurized environments, to enable them to have that space for that learning, so that they can think about improvements, so they can think about their well-being. I wonder if there's any ideas around that.
Do people have examples of where that in their own services? And we've got quite a broad scope of places represented here. Do you have examples of what works in this area? Anita?
Hi. So, yeah, when I was working clinically on a busy acute medical unit, obviously there were things that happened. We needed people to learn from it. So we used to set up tea, coffee and teaching sessions. And we'd have them for an hour. But it wouldn't last an hour. There'd be like sort of 15-minute sessions. People could come and have a hot drink, some biscuits. We couldn't go to Colin the Caterpillar cakes, but we had biscuits. And we would talk about incidences that had happened. And, we had a spate of fractured neck of femurs on the ward. So actually it was, how do we get that learning across, that this has happened, but actually what can we do moving forward together to do that? So it was a completely no blame culture, but also trying to get the staff thinking about innovative ways in which we could make the journey better for our patients, and try and reduce the amount of falls that we were having, which actually was successful, and they went 18 months without an injurious fall on the unit. So it goes to show that if you are frontline, sometimes you don't need like big long study days, you don't need realms of teaching. Sometimes it can be little short bursts that gets the meaning across and gets people thinking creatively.
Yeah, I think there's something really powerful about learning from each other, isn't there? We don't need to all troop off to some academic thing. We all, and particularly when we're working in MDT settings, where there's the opportunities to learn from each other's expertise is huge, isn't it? And exactly as you say, Anita, and setting up the opportunities for that and prioritising the time. And I guess that's another resource issue. It's just that sense of time. It seems to me a kind of a study day is never a wasted day, isn't it? Just because even if what you do is not as good value as it could be, actually just having the time off the hamster wheel to reflect and think in a different way is incredibly valuable, and building that into people's working lives in a realistic way is incredibly important. I come back to the kind of leadership things though, because I do think, we're very, very preoccupied with how we put in place a new leadership structure in this new organisation and what we expect of our leaders. And setting the culture is so critical. Yeah, really important.
Thank
think
you, Lesley. I think that's
yeah.
really helped in terms of that cultural sort of thinking about how do you change that culture. And I think Anita, that lovely little bit about just allowing the time and space on the ward. And I think I've seen space and time allowed, but maybe it's been more management orientated, whereas I think actually we need to inspire staff to create what will suit them for their time and their learning in that ward environment to think out. So yeah, that's really helpful.
Ollie?
Hi. For me, I think it helps if when we're sharing an initiative, so a project that's happened, that you can take the information and pass it on at different levels. So the first level is literally a headline. So if I take a project we did on 7-day working in rehab, so the headline is 7-day working in rehab, reduced length of stay. So you can pass that message on to everybody. Then the next level is, if you want to know more, read this single page summary or watch this 5-minute video. And then if you want to know more, then look at this full report. But within that sharing, the word you used a couple of times, which is great, is reflection. So the challenge is, we don't want people just looking at it going, that's nice, lucky you. We want people thinking, from what I've heard, could I adopt either as a technique or as a principle? So the principle behind that one was working differently, not necessarily 7 days a week, just could you work differently? But I think what you don't want is passive recipients of information that doesn't lead to change in thinking or practice or behaviour or what have you.
Yeah, I agree. And you need people who have the confidence and the belief that they can make a change. They can go from that reflection and the connection into actually, and now as a team, this is how we're going to put that into action. And it's such a critical component of a QI culture, isn't it? That sense of being able to affect change and put your learning into practice. Okay. So are there any other questions or comments before we finish? Catherine?
Yeah, I just really liked what you said. Sorry, my camera's not working.
Sorry.
I appreciated what you said about leaders having to model the culture, and you also mentioned how it's vital that teams have build towards psychological safety. And I'm in a situation, I'm in CQC actually, I'm in an internal, I kind of work internally with the organisation in learning and development. And I'm working at the moment with managers on a programme to help introduce them, perhaps for the first time even, to psychological safety as a concept, and for them to work through what that means eventually to put that in practice in their teams. But if there are examples of psychological safety not happening above them in any layer of the hierarchy, I just wonder, what your advice is there, because we are all in hierarchical institutions. And to what extent can we expect teams to start changing the culture? What do you think about that?
I think there's always going to be a ceiling to what a team can achieve, and actually great team leaders and great teams can achieve a huge amount, but they'll be limited by the approach of the whole organisation. So I think if you get a trust board out approach that's properly supported at every level, then you can do amazing things. If you've not got that, then you do need exceptional teams to be able to achieve that, despite the environment that they're in. And I think one of the things that I really love the work of Brené Brown. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, and that's really about vulnerability. And I do think that it's that, again, it goes back to that know-it-all thing, that defensive you don't challenge me kind of approach that is hugely destructive. And the ability of leaders to be vulnerable and to tolerate that is hugely important. And I think sometimes the more senior people are, the harder that is. The defences are greater, and their sense of the risk of shame or humiliation gets greater because the focus and spotlight is more on them. I think it's such an important issue for trust board development, and is absolutely critical for being able to lead the organisation in the right way. But that's absolutely not to say that individual teams can't do this work. It's just that they'll find it easier and go further if they're in a wider environment that supports them.
That's great, really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, any final comments? I think we leave it there then. Thank you all so much for joining and for the comments in the chat and the questions. Really good to hear from you. Thank you. And Anita, is there anything further you wanted to say?
Thank you.
No, just thank you, Lesley. That was a great session, and there's lots of thanks coming into the chat. Just to say, we do have our keynote speaker tomorrow, Amar Shah, from 12 to 1. He's going to do a Q&A session, so if you've got any questions that you want to ask Amar, then start thinking now if you're able to join. It's a great opportunity to be able to grill him in a nice way.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.